They landed on the parched world in the bottom of a vast ravine, far from where the Ludite Calais had sown in the hard meat eggs. They came in cloaked and during light hours, although the hunt would not begin until after dark. It was all standard procedure. There were some worlds upon which the natives had developed weaponry and would fight for their skins, infected or not. The Chunde had not lived long by being careless on strange terrain, and the planet had not been used for a hunt so recently that precautions could be discarded. Especially now, because since the Ouchers last fitted to hunt here, others had come. The soft meat, bleeding all over the radio bands for all to hear. It was a shock to find them here. Given his choice, he would hunt the soft meat, a thing he had long desired. They were cunning, and they shot back. Soft meat skulls were highly prized, the centerpiece of a warrior's trophy wall. He would challenge them, were it all possible, but not with a handful of raw and unseasoned would-be warriors. Not only would it be foolish, it would also go against the rules of the hunt. The Chunde could almost smell them, the soft meat, and he would like nothing better than to test his mettle against them. But he would not this time. He had responsibilities, duties, and to cast them aside for his personal satisfaction would be to dishonour his name. So the ship would remain cloaked. Any of his party who might venture even remotely close to the Umans would do so in a shift suit, and the soft meat would never know how lucky they had been. Reluctantly, and without explanation, the Chunde caused shift suit electronics to be issued to the students. Let them wonder what his motivations were. They knew enough not to ask. He would tell the older, blooded, of the danger, but there would be no contact with the Umans on this trip. Was an Uman sighted, the blooded would order the students to shift into camouflage and to avoid contact. A pity, but that was the way of it. After he finished this training hunt, his dues would be paid and his application to a blooded warrior only ship would be accepted. Then he would at last get his chance at the Umans. Not here, not now. In the staging area, the younglings were so chikata that they would burn each other if they didn't calm down. The Chunde watched the young males hurriedly don their suits. He stood in the entry and felt the thick anticipation that radiated from them in their frenzied movements. It never failed to please him to see the young so eager to spill their first thwei. There would be a short practice outside of the ship to test the world's gravity while Walker scanned for anything unexpected. It was killing, nothing other than time, a chance to wear the edge off of the young male's hyper-enthusiasm. 2, the hard meat would also be more active after the suns dropped. It was hardly sport to shoot a target curled up asleep. The Chunde turned and walked through the corridor towards the front of the ship. As leader, he would be the first to set foot on the hunting grounds, a pleasure that rumbled deep in his gut. This would be a good hunt, Umans notwithstanding. Naguchi took her second shower of the day in the early evening, as twilight fell over Prosperity Wells. It had been a hard day, but a good one. All of the hers had been penned except for the one of Cho's, and that one was on its way. She stood in front of the hollow mirror in the green linen suit she had worn on her first day in Ryushi, and smiled at her wind-burned complexion. After only a few days outside, her face had begun to take on the look of a rancher's. She liked it. It was the appearance of a person who didn't mind hard work, even though she had to inoculate herself against skin cancers and had run a small fever from the vaccine for most of the day. The Chigusa staff had been setting up tables and portable roasting pits near the shield wall when she had gone to shower and change, but she was surprised at the crowd that had gathered in her short absence. She stepped out of her building and was nearly run over by a group of giggling children. Not many of those here, children, but some. The scent of grilled rinse steaks carried to her, along with the sounds of people talking and laughing. Ranchers and their spouses walked past, hand in hand, all headed toward the landing pad. Naguchi joined them. Hiroki was easy to spot amid the ranchers in his dark dress suit. He stood near the loading ramp, drink in hand. He returned her wave and wove his way through the crowd to meet her. "You look lovely, Michiko-san." "Thank you. You look very nice yourself." She gazed wonderingly at the mass of people all around. "Is every person on the planet here?" "Just about. A few of the staff are watching screens in ops, but other than that..." Naguchi smiled. 100 people in one place is now a mob to me. Funny how perspectives change. Hiroki nodded. It is, and I'm glad to see them enjoying themselves. This is their first roundup, everything they've worked for 3 years. Naguchi looked around at the ranchers, relaxed and mingling in the open compound. It was impossible not to pick up on some of the mood of excitement and accomplishment. Someone had even fed music over the public address system. Couples danced in the deepening dusk, while their children ran and played through the streets. "Come on, let's go greet the ship," said Hiroki. "It's due any minute." She followed him through the dancing crowd towards the antenna tower. "The Home Office called," she said mildly. "They've approved the price hike for the ranchers." Hiroki raised his eyebrows and smiled at her. "Good work, boss. Where are we headed anyway? Wouldn't the best place be—" "The tower is the only place to watch a landing." Hiroki stopped in front of the rung ladder that ran up one side of the transmitting structure and rested one hand on the lowest step. "Can that thing support both of us?" Naguchi looked at the ladder doubtfully. "Let's find out, shall we?" They scaled one story and hit the first landing, then slowly climbed the stairs to the top, 5 floors up. There was a moderate warm breeze blowing, and Naguchi looked down to see the miniature people milling about in the night air. It was easy to forget the pressures of work on such an occasion. Pleasant memories from long ago ran through her head, Nakama festivals with her parents, walks through bonsai forests that made her feel like a giant. A low rumbling began, somewhere in the sky. The people below watched the clouds for movement. Naguchi looked up to see the ship, and even so far away she could tell it was big, huge. It was hard for her mind to grasp such a gigantic object in the air. She had seen craft like it before, of course, but this one was bigger than the entire rec centre and lot building combined. It had push events easily 20 metres long and half as wide on either side. There were 3 loading docks in front, each big enough to admit 4 rints side by side. Giant air pushers swept a benign wind over the crowd as the ship rumbled towards the landing pad. With a roar that drowned out all other sound, the Lecter settled gently. It was quite a trick to land such a tub in atmosphere. The aerodynamics were hardly conducive to such things. The shield wall protected the complex from most of the engine wash, but the southern gale that hit all of them was enough to whip up dresses and hair and a considerable haze of dust. As the thunder dwindled slowly, Naguchi heard a chorus of laughter and hand clapping. It was a magnificent spectacle. The Lecter came to roost. Well, part of the ship anyway. The rest was still in orbit. A hand landed on her shoulder. Hiroki. He grinned at her. "Down to the final click, eh? Let's go introduce ourselves to the crew." They started towards the stairs, Hiroki leading. Naguchi cast one last look at the ship and thought about what he had said, the final kilometre. In spite of the mood of the evening, she had felt a chill at his words. Odd. She brushed the ominous speculation aside and went to join the party. Scott and Tom stepped off the ramp together into Prosperity Wells. For some reason, the mass of people assembled to greet them was a relief to Scott, although he wasn't sure why. Other crew members filed out past them to shake hands and chat with the ranchers and their families. "Hey, we're celebrities, man, check it out," Tom mumbled. Scott smirked. It was true. The locals had gathered around each of the Lecter's crew with smiles and backslaps. "Guess they don't get out much," Scott whispered. A tall, husky man, about 40 TS, with a red beard and a grin, stepped towards them. He held out 2 cups of beer to the pilots. "Ackland's the name," he said, extending his large hand. Tom shook it, then Scott. "I'm head of the local Ranchers Association. How was your trip, Captains?" "Strandberg," said Tom, "but just call me Tom. This is my co-pilot, Scott Conover." The trip was fine. "Nice to meet you, sirs. Hope you and your crew are ready to party, and we got some nice steaks on the grill." Ackland leaned closer and lowered his voice. "And we got some fine young ladies looking for dance partners, I'll bet. That is, if you're inclined that way." Scott grinned. "You bet. Tom here was starting to look pretty good near the last leg of that trip, if you know what I mean." Ackland chuckled and forced an overly jovial sound and clapped Scott on the back. "I thought so," he started. "You know, Can I have your attention, please?" A short Japanese woman in a green suit stood on a chair a few meters away, a dinner tray in hand. "Can I have everyone's attention, please?" She was pretty, that one. Scott looked her up and down. Nice legs, nice butt. A little shy in the breast department, but Scott had seen worse. Who's the babe? He said quietly to Ackland. Tom elbowed him in the gut. Damn feminist. You mean bitch, Ackland replied. Nitrogen Queen, that's the boss. I know you're all anxious for the festivities to begin, but first I have an important announcement. The crowd calmed as everyone turned to look at her. Loading will proceed as follows. Ackland, you're first on deck, Harrison's next, followed by Lucchini and Marionetti. The rest of the assignments will be handed out tomorrow at dusk. She paused, then smiled. One more thing. The company gave their answer on the price adjustment. You'll be getting the increase you requested. Enjoy the party, everyone. She stepped off the chair to the sounds of scattered clapping and hoots of excitement. Go figure, said Ackland. Maybe she's good for something after all. Scott took a long gulp of beer and then laughed. I could think of a few other things that she might be good at. Tom rolled his eyes and Ackland shook his head. I wouldn't try it. Naguchi probably doesn't uncross her legs to take a shit, you know. Too bad, mumbled Tom. He wandered off. Scott took another slug and belched softly. Takes all kinds, right? He said, and looked into his cup. Not bad for a local brew. He picked out the Japanese woman again and studied her smile as she talked to some rancher woman. Ackland was babbling something about the weather, but Scott watched Naguchi. Dust Ball it was, but the place wasn't a lost cause. He swigged one more beer and turned his attention back to Ackland. Anything could happen in 3 days, no matter what the rancher said. Hell, nitrogen was his speciality. Naguchi walked towards the ops centre, the party in full swing behind her. It was definitely a success, in more ways than one. A few of the ranchers had warmed toward her after the announcement, and she had kept up a steady patter of innocuous conversation for at least 2 hours. Nice people, and she'd be doing a good job of nodding and smiling. Although one day doesn't undo 6 months of stupidity, Machiko. Right, but it was a start. It had finally hit home that Hiroki would be leaving along with the lector. A vague sadness had come over her, along with a desire to be alone for a little while. He was perhaps her only friend. She walked into operations to see only one person manning the screens. Collins, right? She said hopefully. The young man nodded and looked up. Go join the party, okay? I'll watch things here for a while. Collins' eyes widened. Really? Thanks, Miss Naguchi. It's just Machiko from now on. She smiled at him and moved by so that he could pass. Okay, he said. Machiko. He sounded uncomfortable with her first name, but he smiled back. He started to walk out and then turned. Oh, listen, when Doc Revner gets back, tell him the Home Office received his report. It's in the tray with his notes. Naguchi frowned. She had seen FemDoc at the party, but Revner hadn't been around, had he? Gets back from where? She said. Said he was going up to Iowa Gorge to look for something, he said. He signed out a hoverbike a couple of hours ago. Today? Bad timing, she said. Yeah, that's what I said, Colin shrugged, but he said it was important. Listen, thanks again. After he had left, Naguchi sat at the console and gazed at the radar, lost in thought. She hadn't expected much from Hiroki at the beginning, but he had been unfailingly patient with her. His professionalism was top-notch. It would be sad to see him leave. She shook her head and glanced around for something to take her mind off of Hiroki. Doc Revner's report lay in a basket nearby, but she hesitated picking it up. What if it was private information? Then he wouldn't have let Colin send it. He would have done it himself. Brilliant. She picked up the stack of hard copy and leaned back in her chair. What the hell was in Iowa Gorge, anyway? She liked the doc. He was a smart man. She leafed through the papers and settled down to read, with a silent wish for Revner to find whatever he was looking for. Kazar trained his binoculars on the site at the bottom of the gorge and inhaled deeply. His heart hammered in his chest, and his hands shook. It was incredible. It was unbelievable. A dozen or so humanoids stood surrounding a large craft, the likes of which he had never seen. The ship looked like a cross between a fish and a huge engine tube. It was a tinted and strange greenish hue, with a broad ramp sat into the ground. The humanoids were tall. He couldn't be sure because there was nothing to show relative size, and the scale in his scope was malfunctioning. But he would guess 2.5 meters, maybe a little more. More amazing, they appeared to be carrying Spears. Revner had stopped halfway down into the gorge, had parked his bike near some rocks 20 metres behind him or so. The adrenaline in his system was screaming at him to go back to the flyer, now. Big aliens with spears did not seem like the kind of folks you wanted to meet by yourself in the middle of the desert, but he couldn't stop looking at the amazing sight. He hit the full magnification button and the creatures zoomed closer. Tall, muscular, definitely armed. Still too far away to get a good view, and it was also too bad the scope's scaler was out of whack. He wanted to get a size on them. Whatever they were definitely not human. Now here was a discovery that would get his name in the books. Not just a new species of spider or crab, but sentient aliens. He watched for another half-minute. What were they doing here? What were they? 100 questions formed and tried to rise all at once. Incredible. He licked his lips and focused on one of the alien faces. Some kind of mask it wore, like the others. Breathing gear? He would go back to town, get some of the ranchers, some photo equipment. Kazar blinked. One of the creatures turned and looked at him. It threw back its head. Its long, odd braids fell back. A long, crazy howl filled the canyon, echoed off of the cliffs, and beat at his ears, joined by others. Impossible. He was mostly hidden from view, and he could hardly see them with the scope. They couldn't see him, but they did. He knew for sure in a second, when they ran towards him, waving their spears, screaming.